The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 star systems in 3 months. Their crimson warships moved through space like predators, each vessel the size of a small moon, bristling with energy cannons that could glass entire planets. The galaxy's greatest civilizations fell before them like wheat before a scythe. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the flagship Times Dominion's Edge Asterisk, watching another world burn. The third planet of the Altarian system writhed beneath sheets of plasma fire as his bombardment fleet methodically destroyed every trace of civilization. The purple-skinned Altarians had been particularly stubborn, holding out for 6 weeks before their orbital defenses finally cracked. "Another victory for the Empire," announced his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Zethra. Her 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction as she read the casualty reports. Complete annihilation of their fleet. 0 survivors detected on the surface. Kethvar nodded approvingly. The Zephyrians had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived, and they had carried that philosophy to the stars. Mercy was weakness. Compromise was failure. Total domination was the only acceptable outcome. "Set course for the Terran Federation border," he commanded. "It's time to deal with the humans." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone had heard the stories about humans, crazy, unpredictable primates from a backwater world called Earth. They were newcomers to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most species dismissed them as primitive barbarians who would never amount to anything significant. But the humans had surprised everyone. In just 5 decades, they had established colonies on dozens of worlds, built a respectable fleet, and formed alliances with several alien races. Some called them adaptable. Others called them dangerous. The Zephyrians simply called them next. "Sir," Zethra said hesitantly, "intelligence reports suggest the humans have been studying our tactics. They may be more prepared than our previous enemies." Kethvar's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of dismissal. "Every species thinks they're prepared until they face the full might of the Empire. The humans are flesh and blood, just like all the others. They will break." The massive fleet of 300 warships began their journey toward human space. Each vessel carried thousands of soldiers, equipped with weapons that had shattered the defenses of ancient civilizations. The Zephyrians had never lost a major battle. Their technology was superior, their tactics proven, their will unbreakable. 3 days later, they reached the edge of Terran Federation space. The first human colony world, New Geneva, lay before them, a blue-green jewel orbited by a handful of defense platforms and a small patrol fleet. Intelligence suggested a population of 12 million humans lived on the surface, along with various alien refugees who had fled Zephyrian expansion. "Pathetic," muttered Commander Yethkor from his position at the weapons station. 12 defense platforms, and maybe 30 ships. We could destroy this entire system with a single cruiser. But Admiral Kethvar was more cautious. Something felt different here. The human ships weren't fleeing in panic, like other species had done. Instead, they formed precise battle lines, their weapons powered but not yet firing. Long-range scans revealed the humans had been busy in the months since the Zephyrian advance began. The defense platforms were larger than expected, and there were unusual energy readings coming from several locations on the planet's surface. "Open a communication channel," Kethvar ordered. "Let's give them the standard ultimatum." The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human female wearing a crisp military uniform. She had short gray hair, steel blue eyes, and an expression that suggested she had been expecting this moment. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Defense Force," she said calmly. "You are in violation of Federation space. Turn back now, or we will be forced to defend ourselves." Kethvar almost laughed. The audacity of these creatures was amusing. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your worlds belong to us now. Surrender immediately, and we will allow 10% of your population to live as slaves. Resist, and we will sterilize every world in your territory. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Counteroffer. Leave our space immediately, and we won't destroy your fleet. This time Kethvar did laugh, the sound echoing across his bridge. You have 30 small ships. We have 300 capital vessels. Your mathematics seem impaired. Human. Our math is fine, Chen replied. But your intelligence gathering needs work. You might want to check your sensors again. Ella. Something in her tone made Kethvar pause. He gestured to his sensor officer, who began running deeper scans of the system. After a moment, the officer's face went pale. Sir, the officer said quietly, there are massive structures on the dark side of the planet's largest moon. And sir, there's something else. Long-range sensors are detecting a large object approaching from the outer system. It's big, sir. Very big. Kethvar felt a flicker of unease, but pushed it aside. The Zephyrians had faced large ships before. Their own dreadnoughts were over 20 kilometers long, armed with enough firepower to crack continents. How large? He asked. The sensor officer swallowed nervously. Approximately 40 kilometers in length, sir. But that's not the strangest part. It's not showing up on most of our scans. We're only detecting it because of gravitational distortion. On the screen, Admiral Chen smiled for the first time. It wasn't a pleasant expression. That would be the UFS Retribution, our newest addition to the fleet. Kethvar studied the human's face, looking for signs of deception or bluffing. But there was something in her eyes that reminded him uncomfortably of his own reflection. A cold certainty that victory was inevitable. One ship, he said finally. Even if it's as large as you claim, it's still one ship against 300. You're right, Chen agreed. It is just one ship, but it's a human ship. That makes all the difference. The communication ended, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in tense silence. In the distance, something was moving between the outer planets, something so large it was bending light around itself. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the human defense fleet is taking position behind their platforms. They're not advancing, but they're not retreating either. Kethvar considered his options. He could order the attack immediately, overwhelming the human defenses through sheer numbers. But something about this situation felt like a trap. The humans were too calm, too confident. In his experience, such confidence usually meant hidden advantages. Begin standard bombardment protocol, he ordered finally. Target their defense platforms first, then the ships. I want to see what surprises they have before we commit our full force. The forward elements of the Zephyrian fleet opened fire, sending streams of plasma and particle beams toward the human positions. The defense platforms responded immediately, but their return fire was surprisingly accurate and devastatingly effective. 3 Zephyrian cruisers simply ceased to exist in the first exchange, vaporized by energy beams that seemed to cut through their shields like paper. What was that? Kethvar demanded. How did they penetrate our deflectors so easily? Unknown, sir, the sensor officer replied, frantically checking his readings. But sir, that object, from the outer system, it's accelerating. It will be here. The emergency session of the Zephyrian High Command convened in the deepest bunkers of the homeworld, 300 meters below the capital city. The massive chamber, which had witnessed the planning of countless conquests, now hosted the Empire's first strategic retreat in over 2 centuries. Emperor Vex Thul sat upon his obsidian throne, his 4 eyes burning with barely contained rage. The reports streaming in from the Terran border painted an impossible picture. In less than 6 hours, the humans had not only repelled the Empire's invasion force but had completely annihilated it. Of the 300 ships that had entered human space, exactly 7 had escaped to tell the tale. Explain to me, the Emperor growled, his voice echoing off the chamber's walls, how the most powerful fleet in galactic history was destroyed by a single ship. Admiral Kethvar stood before the throne, his uniform scorched and his pride shattered. He had barely escaped the slaughter, his flagship's engines failing as they fled the battlefield. The memory of what he had witnessed still haunted him. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice hoarse. It wasn't just a ship. It was something else entirely. The humans have developed technology that operates outside the known laws of physics. Their weapons don't just destroy matter, they unmake it, as if erasing targets from existence itself. Chief Science Advisor Yex Moore stepped forward, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "That's impossible. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. No weapon can simply delete matter from the universe. Tell that to the crews of the Eternal Hammer, the Starcleaver, and the 200 other ships that simply ceased to exist," Kethvar snapped. "I watched dreadnoughts that had survived 1,000 battles vanish without a trace. The humans aren't using conventional technology. They're using something else." The Emperor leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the assembled officers. "You're suggesting these primates have surpassed our science? These creatures who were swinging from trees when our ancestors conquered the first solar system. Perhaps that's exactly why they succeeded where we failed," interjected Intelligence Director Mexhan. Her cybernetic implants glowed as she accessed the Empire's databases. "We've spent 10,000 years perfecting known technologies, making incremental improvements to weapons and shields that follow established physics. The humans approach problems differently." She activated a holographic display showing human colony worlds. "Look at their expansion pattern. Where other species establish colonies on worlds similar to their homeworld, humans colonize everything. Desert planets, ice worlds, gas giant moons with toxic atmospheres, they adapt to environments that would kill most species. They don't just survive in hostile conditions, they thrive." "What does that have to do with their weapons?" demanded Fleet Admiral Zorkek, whose own task force was stationed at the Terran border. "Everything," Mexhan replied. "Their entire mindset is different. When they encounter a problem, they don't look for conventional solutions. They create new ones. Our intelligence suggests they've been studying our expansion for months, analyzing our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses." Emperor Vex Thul stood, his massive form towering over the assembled officers. "You're telling me we've been outmaneuvered by creatures who learned to travel between stars 50 years ago?" "Yes, Your Majesty. And there's more." Mexhan manipulated the display, showing detailed scans of the human battleship. "The vessel that destroyed our fleet, the UFS Retribution, appears to be using what they call zero-point energy manipulation. They're tapping into the quantum fluctuations of empty space itself." The silence that followed was deafening. Zero-point energy was theoretical to most species, a mathematical curiosity with no practical applications. The amount of energy contained in a cubic meter of empty space was enormous. But accessing it was considered impossible. "If they've truly mastered zero-point manipulation," whispered Chief Science Advisor Yex Moore, "then they have access to unlimited energy. They could power weapons of unimaginable destruction, create defensive fields that could withstand the heat of a star, or even manipulate gravity itself." "Which explains how their ship survived our bombardment," Kethvar added grimly. "It wasn't using conventional shields. It was actually bending space-time around itself, deflecting our attacks into parallel dimensions." The Emperor paced the length of his throne room, each footstep echoing like thunder. For 10 millennia, the Zephyrian Empire had based its strategy on technological superiority. Their ships were bigger, their weapons more powerful, their armor thicker. They had never encountered an enemy that could match their firepower, let alone exceed it. "What are our options?" he finally asked. Fleet Admiral Zorkek cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, I have 50,000 ships under my command at the border. We could launch a full-scale invasion, overwhelming them through sheer numbers." "You have conventional ships," Kethvar interrupted. "Ships that use conventional physics. How many vessels do you think will survive contact with even one of these human battleships?" "Then what do you suggest?" Zorkek demanded. That we simply surrender? That the mighty Zephyrian Empire bows before these upstart primates? Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the bunker. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in red, as tactical displays activated around the room. A communications officer rushed forward, his face pale with terror. "Your Majesty," he gasped. "We're receiving reports from the border fleets. Human ships have been detected in 17 different systems. They're not advancing, they're just there, waiting." Mexhan's implants flickered as she accessed the incoming data. "It's worse than that, Your Majesty. Long-range sensors show massive human fleets massing behind their border, ships we've never seen before. And sir?" The tactical displays around the chamber lit up with intelligence reports. The humans weren't just defending their territory anymore. They were positioning themselves for something much larger. Fleets that had been hidden in the outer reaches of their systems were now moving into position. The Terran Federation, which had seemed like a minor power just days ago, was revealing military assets that dwarfed anything the Empire had encountered. "How many ships?" the Emperor asked quietly. "Conservative estimates suggest at least 5,000 capital vessels," Mexhan replied. "But Your Majesty, that's not the concerning part. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting construction activity in human space. Massive construction. They're building something in the Sol system, something that's already larger than our biggest space stations." Emperor Vex Thule stared at the displays, watching red markers spread across what had been a map of easy conquest just hours ago. Each marker represented a human fleet, a threat to the Empire's dominance. The humans hadn't just repelled one invasion, they had prepared for war on a galactic scale. "They've been planning this," he realized. "From the moment we began our expansion, they've been preparing. While we conquered other species, they were studying us, learning our weaknesses, building weapons specifically designed to counter our advantages." Admiral Kethvar nodded grimly. "The battle at New Geneva wasn't a desperate defense, Your Majesty. It was a demonstration. They wanted us to see what they were capable of. They wanted us to understand that our conventional advantages mean nothing against their technology." "But why reveal themselves now?" asked Yexmore. "If they were truly prepared for galactic war, why not strike while our fleets were scattered across conquered territories?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice echoed through the chamber's communication system. A human voice, speaking perfect Zephyrian. "Because," the voice said calmly, "we wanted to give you a chance to make the right choice." Security alarms shrieked as guards rushed to defensive positions. The Emperor's personal shields activated, surrounding him in a glowing barrier. But the voice continued, unperturbed by the chaos. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. I'm broadcasting this message directly to your quantum communication network. Yes, we can do that now. We've been monitoring your emergency session." The main display flickered and resolved into the face of the human admiral who had first confronted Kethvar. Her expression was serious, but not threatening. "Emperor Vex Thule," she continued, "you have a choice to make. The Zephyrian Empire can end its expansion and enter into peaceful negotiations with the Federation and our allies. Or you can continue your campaign of conquest and face the consequences." "You dare threaten the Empire?" the Emperor roared. "We have conquered 17 civilizations. Our fleets number in the hundreds of thousands." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "We know. We've been in contact with the survivors of those civilizations. Many of them have provided us with intelligence about your tactics, your technology, and your military capabilities. In return, we've offered them something you never did. Hope." The implications hit the assembled officers like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war, they had been building alliances with the Empire's victims. Every species the Zephyrians had conquered had become a potential enemy, feeding information to humanity. The Altarians, the Veltar Confederacy, the Mechlon Republic, they all survived your total annihilation campaigns, Chen continued. Scattered survivors, hidden colonies, secret bases. They've been waiting for someone powerful enough to challenge the Empire. We are that someone. R.I. Emperor Vexithul felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. The Empire's greatest strength had always been its ability to inspire fear in its enemies. But these humans didn't seem afraid. If anything, they seemed confident, almost eager for the confrontation to continue. "What are your terms?" he asked finally. "Immediate cessation of all military operations against Federation allies and neutral systems, complete withdrawal from the 17 systems you've occupied in the last year, reparations to be paid to the survivors of those worlds, and formal recognition of the Terran Federation as a sovereign power with the right to defend itself and its allies." The demands hung in the air like a death sentence. To accept would mean abandoning the Empire's expansion, admitting defeat to a species they had dismissed as primitives. To refuse would mean war against an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying their best fleets. "And if we refuse?" the Emperor asked. Admiral Chen's smile returned that cold, predatory expression that had unnerved Kethvar during their first encounter. "Then you'll discover what humans are really capable of when we stop playing defense," she said. The Retribution was our oldest battleship, Admiral Kethvar. It was also our smallest. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The Emperor looked around at his advisors, his generals, his scientists, all the minds that had guided the Empire to 10,000 years of dominance. None of them seemed to have answers. Outside, in the depths of space, human fleets continued to mass at the border. And deep in the Sol system, construction continued on something that would either ensure peace or guarantee the Empire's destruction. In 30 minutes, as the battle intensified, more Zephyrian ships began taking damage. The human weapons seemed to ignore conventional shielding, striking with precision and power that defied explanation. But the Empire had numbers on their side. For every human ship destroyed, they could afford to lose 10. Then the long-range sensors registered something impossible. The approaching object wasn't just large, it was massive beyond comprehension. 47 kilometers long, 12 kilometers wide, and covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb sensor beams. More disturbing still, it was accelerating at rates that should have turned its crew into paste. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the approaching vessel." "Put it through," Kethvar ordered. A new face appeared on the screen, a human male with dark skin, silver hair, and eyes like chips of ice. His uniform was different from Admiral Chen's, bearing insignia that suggested very high rank. "I am Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb, commanding officer of the UFS Retribution," the human said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "You have exactly 5 minutes to withdraw from Federation space. This is your only warning." Whoa, Kethvar's temper finally snapped. "Human, you face the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Your primitive technology cannot stand against us." Admiral Webb's expression didn't change. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The transmission ended. In the distance, the massive shape of the human battleship was now visible to the naked eye. A dark wedge against the stars that seemed to drink in light. Energy readings from the vessel were off the charts, unlike anything in the Zephyrian databases. "All ships," Kethvar commanded, "concentrate fire on the approaching vessel. I want that thing destroyed before it reaches weapons range." 300 Zephyrian warships turned their guns toward the Retribution, unleashing a barrage that could have sterilized a planet. The space around the human battleship lit up like a star, as thousands of energy beams and projectiles converged on its position. When the light faded, the Retribution was still there. Not only intact, but apparently undamaged. Its dark hull seemed to have absorbed the entire attack without even slowing down. "Impossible," whispered Commander Yethkor. "Nothing could survive that much firepower." Admiral Webb's face reappeared on the screen, and this time, he was smiling. It was the smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. "Time's up," he said simply. What happened next would be remembered in Zephyrian military academies for generations to come, assuming the Empire survived long enough to have academies. The human battleship opened fire. But it wasn't weapons in any conventional sense. Reality itself seemed to bend around the retribution as it unleashed its arsenal. Space warped and twisted. Zephyrian ships found themselves torn apart by forces that defied physics. Some simply vanished, as if they had never existed. Others were turned inside out, their crews dead before they could even scream. In the span of 30 seconds, 50 Zephyrian warships were gone. The survivors tried to retreat, but the retribution was faster than anything that size had a right to be, and its weapons had unlimited range. Admiral Kethvar watched his invincible fleet die, and for the first time in his military career, he felt something his species had almost forgotten: fear. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were sending a message to every would-be conqueror in the galaxy. Some battles you win. Some battles you lose. And some battles teach you that you were never fighting the same war your enemy was fighting. 3 weeks after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, Emperor Vex Thul made his decision. Standing before the assembled war council in the Empire's most secure facility, he spoke the words that would reshape galactic civilization. "We reject the human demands," he declared, his 4 fists slamming against the command table. "The Zephyrian Empire bows to no one. If these primates want war, we will give them war." The reaction was immediate. Fleet Admiral Zorkek activated his personal communicator, sending orders to the massive armada waiting at the border. Chief Science Advisor Yex Moore began coordinating the Empire's research facilities to develop countermeasures for human technology. Intelligence Director Mexhan dispatched her agents to gather every scrap of information about Federation capabilities, but Admiral Kethvar remained silent, staring at the tactical displays that showed human fleet positions. Something about their deployment pattern bothered him. The Federation forces weren't massed for invasion. They were positioned defensively, as if waiting for something. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "I request permission to study the human battle formations more closely. Their positioning suggests they're expecting us to make the first move." "Of course they are," Zorkek scoffed. "They're trying to appear defensive while building up their forces. Classic misdirection." Mexhan shook her head, her cybernetic implants glowing as she processed intelligence data. "It's not misdirection. Our deep space monitors show they've completed construction of whatever they were building in the Sol system. The energy readings are unprecedented." On cue, the chamber's main display activated, showing a transmission from one of the Empire's most distant monitoring stations. The operator's voice was strained with disbelief. "Command, this is Monitor Station Sigma 7. We're detecting massive energy discharges from the human home system. Whatever they built, it's activating. Sir, the energy output is equivalent to a small star." Emperor Vex Thul studied the data streaming across the displays. The humans had been busy during the 3 weeks of ultimatum. Construction materials from across their territory had been flowing towards Sol, along with ships from species the Empire had thought extinct. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. "Whatever they've built, it's just one target. One massive target that our fleets can destroy." But even as he spoke, reports began flooding in from across the Empire. Human ships weren't just massing at the border anymore. They were appearing throughout Zephyrian space fast, silent vessels that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Most disturbing of all, they weren't attacking. They were just watching. Captain Hex Val of the heavy cruiser Times Iron Dominion Times was the first to report direct contact with these mysterious vessels. His ship was patrolling the Nexus system, far from the Terran border, when sensors detected an anomaly. "It just appeared, sir," his tactical officer reported nervously. "It's not responding to hails, but it's not taking any aggressive action either." Through the cruiser's viewports, they could see the human vessel. A sleek, dark ship, about half the size of the Times Iron Dominion asterisk. It hung motionless in space, seeming to study them as they studied it. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission." The main screen activated, revealing the face of a human male wearing an unfamiliar uniform. Behind him, the ship's bridge was eerily quiet, with crew members working at stations that seemed to bend space around them. "Captain Hexval," the human said calmly. "I am Commander Torres of the UFS Shadow. My ship is equipped with experimental stealth technology. We wanted to introduce ourselves before the main event begins." "Main event?" Hexval demanded. "What are you talking about?" Commander Torres consulted a device that appeared to be floating in mid-air. "In approximately 47 minutes, your Emperor will order the attack on our border fleets. When that happens, the war will officially begin. I wanted to give you and your crew a chance to surrender before that happens." The audacity of the statement left Hexval speechless. His ship outgunned and outmassed the human vessel by a significant margin. Yet this human commander was offering him the chance to surrender. "You're insane," Hexval finally managed. "We have you outnumbered and outgunned." Torres smiled sadly. "Captain, look at your sensor readings. Really, look at them." Hexval gestured to his sensor officer, who began running deep scans of the surrounding space. After a moment, the officer's face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, "there are more ships out there. Lots more ships. They're everywhere." The tactical display updated, showing the true scope of the human presence. The Times Iron Dominion Times wasn't facing one ship, it was surrounded by dozens of vessels, all previously invisible to their sensors. More disturbing still, similar groups were appearing throughout the Empire, materializing around key installations, military bases, and fleet anchorages. "The Federation has been preparing for this moment for months," Torres explained. "While your Empire focused on conquest, we focused on infiltration. Our stealth ships have been mapping every system under Zephyrian control. We know the location of every military base, every supply depot, every shipyard." As if summoned by his words, reports began flooding into Empire Command. Human vessels were appearing throughout Zephyrian space, not attacking, but making their presence known. The psychological effect was devastating. Every ship captain, every base commander, every planetary governor suddenly realized they were being watched by an enemy they couldn't detect. Emperor Vex Thule stared at the incoming reports, his confidence finally beginning to crack. "Conservative estimates suggest over 20,000 vessels," Mexhan reported, her voice hollow with shock. "But sir, that's not the worst part. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy buildups in the Sol system. Whatever they built there, it's about to activate." The main display shifted to show a live feed from the Empire's most advanced monitoring station. In the heart of human space, something impossible was taking shape. The massive construction project the humans had been working on was revealed to be a ring structure surrounding their sun, a solid band of metal and energy collectors that stretched across hundreds of millions of kilometers. "It's a Dyson ring," whispered Chief Science Advisor Yex Moore. "They've built a partial Dyson sphere around their star. They're collecting the entire energy output of their sun." The implications were staggering. A star produced more energy in 1 second than the Zephyrian Empire used in an entire year. If the humans had found a way to harness even a fraction of that power, their weapons would be capable of destroying entire fleets with a single shot. "Emperor," Admiral Kethvar said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider." But Vex Thule's pride had been pushed too far. "No, we are the Zephyrian Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. I will not be intimidated by upstart primates, no matter what toys they've built." He activated the fleet communication system, his voice carrying to every ship in the Empire's massive armada. "All units, begin the attack. Show these humans what happens when they challenge the Empire." Fleet Admiral Zorkek's forces, massed at the Terran border, surged forward. 100,000 ships, the largest invasion force in galactic history, accelerated toward human space, their weapons charged, their crews ready for glorious victory. They never reached the Federation border. The Dyson ring around Sol pulsed once, sending a wave of energy across interstellar space at faster-than-light speeds. When it reached the Zephyrian fleet, Reality simply changed. Ships didn't explode or break apart, they just stopped existing, as if they had been erased from the universe by some cosmic editor. In 30 seconds, 100,000 ships and their crews simply ceased to be. But the humans weren't finished. Across the Empire, the stealth ships that had been watching and waiting began to move. Using technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, they struck at military installations with surgical precision. Not to destroy everything, but to eliminate the Empire's ability to wage war. Weapons factories found their fusion cores mysteriously shut down. Shipyards discovered their construction equipment had been quietly sabotaged. Military academies received visits from human diplomats offering to discuss surrender terms. The Empire's vast military machine ground to a halt, not through brute force, but through precisely targeted disruption. On the Imperial homeworld, Emperor Vex Thul watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from across his territory, worlds surrendering without a fight, fleets standing down, governors accepting human occupation forces. The speed of the collapse was breathtaking. How? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Kethvar, who had been monitoring the human communications, provided the answer. They've been in contact with every species we've conquered, every world we've oppressed. They didn't just build an alliance, they built a liberation movement. Every attack on our infrastructure was coordinated with local resistance groups. The final blow came when Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen in the Empire's capital city. Her message was broadcast simultaneously to every world under Zephyrian control, translated into hundreds of languages. People of the galaxy, she began. Today marks the end of the Zephyrian Empire's reign of terror. But more importantly, it marks the beginning of something new. The Terran Federation offers protection to all species, alliance to all who seek peace, and justice for those who have suffered under oppression. She looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to Emperor Vex Thul personally. The age of conquest is over. The age of cooperation has begun. In his throne room, surrounded by the wreckage of his dreams of eternal dominance, Emperor Vex Thul finally understood what Admiral Chen had meant during their first encounter. The humans hadn't just won a war, they had redefined what victory looked like. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed invincible just hours ago, formally surrendered before the day was over. Not because their ships had been destroyed, but because they finally understood they had never been fighting the same war the humans were fighting. Years later, when historians studied the collapse of the Zephyrian Empire, they would identify the moment when everything changed. It wasn't when the human battleship reached the front lines. It was when humanity decided that the galaxy deserved better than endless conquest. The humans hadn't just proven they were stronger. They had proven there was a better way to be strong.